The storm on Varela had been raging for days, shaking the ground with every lightning strike. The sky was an angry swirl of violet and black, and the wind carried a sharp metallic tang. The alien city, built of glimmering crystal towers, seemed almost alive as the storm roared over it, reflecting light in jagged patterns across its streets. Ethan Cole had landed in this place unexpectedly, his ship disabled by the planet's magnetic storms. He hadn't expected to survive the landing, but somehow he had. Somehow he had survived the war that had swept through Varela in the last few days. He stumbled through the streets, dragging his damaged armor behind him. Every step hurt. His left leg was scraped and bleeding. His hands were bruised, and his face bore the marks of countless minor injuries from alien weapons. But still he moved forward. Humans had a saying, survival was not about avoiding pain. It was about moving forward despite it. He didn't have long. Alien scouts were everywhere, patrolling the streets with keen eyes and sharp weapons. Ethan had seen what they were capable of in the battles he had witnessed from the wreckage of the war. They were taller, stronger, and faster than any human he had ever faced. But he knew one thing humans often had that aliens didn't: courage combined with unpredictability. That combination had kept him alive so far. Suddenly a shadow fell across him, and he felt a hand on his shoulder, strong and unyielding. Before he could react, he was lifted and carried through the air, his body colliding with walls and narrow streets. The Varelan scouts didn't speak as they moved him. Their eyes were cold, their expressions unreadable, but they moved with a precision that betrayed their training. Ethan tried to struggle, but it was useless. They were simply too strong. Eventually, they brought him to the city's center, a massive crystal palace that reflected the storm in a dazzling display. Ethan had seen alien architecture before, but nothing like this. The palace was tall and grand, built of interlocking crystals that seemed almost alive. Light from the storm outside refracted through them, casting shifting patterns on the floor and walls. He was shoved into a wide chamber, and the scout stepped back. At the center of the chamber sat the queen, Seraphine. The woman was taller than any human he had ever seen, her presence commanding every eye in the room. Her long white hair shimmered even in the dim light, a crown resting upon her head, marking her as the ruler of this fierce empire. She wore ceremonial armor unlike any battlefield gear. It was more symbolic than functional, emphasizing her status rather than her strength. Yet there was no mistaking her for weak. Even in stillness, she radiated authority. Ethan took a deep breath and straightened his back. He was battered, bruised, and exhausted, but he would not show fear. He had seen too many humans fall because they had bowed too quickly, smiled too easily, or surrendered their will. He would not be one of them. The queen's eyes fixed on him, and the room fell silent. Hundreds of Varelan warriors watched from the sidelines, waiting to see how this human would respond. He had heard stories about their species. No human had ever stood unbroken in the court of the Varelan queen. To see one alive today would be impossible. The queen spoke, her voice calm but carrying an authority that resonated through the chamber. "Kneel," she commanded. Ethan's jaw tightened. He shook his head. He had expected this. After all, this was the leader of the alien empire, and she saw herself as above all others. But he would not kneel, not out of arrogance, but out of principle. Humans valued respect, but respect was earned, not demanded. "I do not kneel," he said, his voice steady despite the pain in his chest and legs. "You will get my respect when you earn it." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The warriors gasped. Some whispered among themselves. The queen tilted her head, intrigued. No human had ever spoken this way, and certainly not in front of her. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing in curiosity rather than anger. Instead of reacting with fury, she stepped down from her throne and walked slowly toward him. Her gaze swept over every inch of his body, noting the scratches and dents in his armor, the bruises on his skin, and the calm determination in his eyes. She touched a plate of his armor gently, lifting it slightly, then letting it drop back. "You survived their weapons?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "They hit harder than I expected, but I am still here." The queen raised an eyebrow. She had expected some pitiful, broken human. Instead, she found someone who carried himself with quiet strength, someone who had survived battles no alien should have survived. Her curiosity grew stronger with each passing moment. She circled him slowly, speaking softly so only he could hear. "I want to see what stands beneath that armor. Remove it." Ethan froze for a moment. This was unexpected. Humans trusted armor. It was protection, identity, and survival all in one. Yet he saw no malice in her eyes, only fascination. He understood then that this was not a command meant to humiliate, but a test of courage. He unfastened the locks on his armor slowly, piece by piece, until the plates fell to the floor with a series of dull clinks. The chamber was silent except for the sound of metal hitting the crystal floor. His body was covered in bruises, scratches, and dirt, but he was still standing. He did not hide the scars. Humans bore them as proof of survival, proof of battles fought and endured. Seraphine studied him, her eyes widening slightly. He was not a monster, not a warrior built like their own, but a human, vulnerable yet unbroken. She could feel something strange stirring inside her. Respect, perhaps. Fascination? Definitely. But more than that, she felt a challenge she had never encountered before. "Why do you fight?" she asked. Ethan's answer was simple, but it carried weight. "We fight because we cannot afford to lose." The Queen looked at him, trying to understand. Her entire life had been built on strength, power, and perfection. Yet this human, fragile by her standards, had survived, had resisted, and had stood before her without fear. It was a concept she could not ignore. The room remained tense. Some of the warriors whispered, questioning the Queen's decision to keep him alive. Others were visibly disturbed. They had never seen their leader hesitate, never seen her face such a challenge without ordering immediate death. But Seraphine did not waver. She had made a decision. This human would live. She ordered food and water for him, and for the first time Ethan noticed the Queen's curiosity was not only personal, but strategic. She wanted to know about humanity, about his technology, about his battles. For hours she questioned him in private, asking about Earth, about human armies, and about the strange ingenuity that allowed them to survive in impossible situations. As the storm outside continued, Ethan was allowed to rest. He sat by a window looking out at the alien city, marveling at the sheer scale of it. The streets below were illuminated by the storm's lightning, and the crystal buildings seemed to pulse with life. He realized that this world was as dangerous as it was beautiful, but danger was never far. Late that night, while the Queen was in her chambers, he sensed movement behind him. A shadow moved silently, a blade glinting under the fractured light. He had learned not to trust even the quietest moments. His instincts kicked in and he spun around, grabbing the attacker by the wrist and twisting until the blade clattered to the floor. Before he could react further, the Queen appeared, furious. She did not scold Ethan, however. She scowled at the would-be assassin, a clear warning in her gaze. It became obvious to Ethan that the danger he faced here was not only from outside forces, but also from within the palace. His presence challenged the old order, and not everyone welcomed change. Yet despite the fear and suspicion, he remained calm. He had survived far worse than this. The Queen watched him, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. She had seen his courage, his defiance, and his strength of will. In that moment, she understood that there was more to this human than met the eye, a being capable of more than brute force, a mind and heart that refused to break. And so, the first day ended with the human alive, unarmored, and standing tall in the face of an alien empire that had never known such resilience. For the first time in her life, Seraphine faced not a subject, not a prisoner, but a true equal in spirit, even if his body was smaller, frailer, and entirely human. The storm outside raged on, and the palace settled into a tense quiet. The Queen considered her next steps carefully. She was fascinated, challenged, and perhaps even intrigued. The human was no longer just a survivor. He was a puzzle, a spark that might ignite change across her empire. And she knew that whatever happened next, Virella would never be the same again. The night on Virella was alive with tension. Though the storm had passed, the city remained restless. Crystal towers reflected the pale light of the twin moons, and shadows moved where none should have been. Ethan Cole had slept little, his body aching from wounds and exhaustion, yet his mind remained alert. The palace was not just a home for the Queen. It was a labyrinth of politics, power, and danger. One wrong step, and he could fall victim to the very people who had captured him. Seraphine, the alien queen, had spent hours the previous night studying him in ways she could not explain. She had watched him eat, observed his injuries, and listened to his quiet breathing as he slept. Unlike any creature she had met before, he did not rely on strength alone. There was a fire in him, a steady, unwavering flame that refused to be extinguished. She could feel it radiating, challenging everything she had believed about humans. Early in the morning, she summoned him to the throne room once more. The chamber was empty except for the guards standing silently along the walls. Ethan entered cautiously, still unarmored, his body marked with bruises and scratches. Despite his injuries, he walked with the same determination that had carried him through the war. "Stand in the center," Seraphine commanded, her voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. Ethan obeyed without hesitation. "You have no armor, no weapons. You are vulnerable in every way, and yet you are still here. Why?" Ethan's eyes met hers, unflinching. "Because I have nothing else to rely on but my will," he said. "I can fall, I can bleed, I can die, but I will not surrender. That is how humans survive." The queen tilted her head, studying him. She had expected arrogance or fear, or perhaps some clever excuse. Instead, she saw honesty, raw and unfiltered. It unsettled her more than any battle ever could. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You are different. Your species has endured against odds that no one should survive. Tell me, human, why do you persist when all seems lost?" Ethan looked at her, the faintest hint of a smile appearing despite the fatigue on his face. "Because that is what we do. We keep moving forward. That is how we survive. That is how we win." The queen studied him for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, she made a decision. "You will not be executed," she said, her voice carrying finality. "You will remain here under my protection. I want to understand your species and perhaps, I want to see what else you can do." Ethan nodded. He did not fully trust her words, but it was the closest thing to an offer of peace he had received on this planet. He had survived so far through instinct, skill, and a stubborn refusal to die. But now, for the first time, he felt the weight of possibility, the idea that survival could be more than mere endurance. Over the following days, Ethan learned the complexities of Viralan society. He observed their warriors training with deadly precision, studied the intricate politics of the court, and began to understand the unspoken rules that governed the queen's authority. Everywhere he went, he noticed eyes watching him, not just the queen's, but the entire empire's. His presence was a statement, a challenge, a curiosity that no one could ignore. The queen, meanwhile, found herself torn between fascination and caution. She had seen humans fight before, but she had never met one who carried himself without fear. Even when surrounded by enemies and stripped of protection, she began visiting him in private, asking questions not about survival but about humanity itself. She wanted to know how such a fragile species could endure, how it could innovate, how it could persist when faced with annihilation. One night, as Ethan rested in a small chamber near the queen's private quarters, he sensed movement. He turned instinctively, seeing the faint outline of a figure approaching with a weapon drawn. Before the attacker could strike, Ethan moved, disarming the intruder with a swift, precise motion. The would-be assassin collapsed, stunned by his unexpected speed and skill. Seraphine appeared moments later, her expression a mixture of fury and admiration. "You have defended yourself again," she said, her voice steady. "And yet you did not kill. Why?" Ethan's gaze met hers. "Because I fight to survive, not to kill unless necessary. That is how humans endure. That is how we protect those we care about." The queen studied him silently. In that moment, she realized that his strength was not in his body, nor in his armor, nor in any weapon. It was in his mind, his heart, and his will. He was human, and yet he embodied qualities that even the strongest Viralan warriors could not match. The following day, rebellion erupted within the palace. Some of the queen's generals saw the human as a threat to their authority and attempted to seize control. Alarms sounded and the palace shook with the chaos of battle. Ethan, though unarmored, did not hesitate. He moved through the corridors with a combination of caution and skill, defending himself and others as needed. His presence inspired the queen's loyal guards, who rallied behind him despite their initial distrust. Seraphine fought alongside him, wielding her ceremonial blade with lethal precision. Together they navigated the labyrinthine halls, fending off rebels and securing key positions in the palace. Ethan's human ingenuity became apparent as he used the environment to his advantage, shifting heavy objects to block doors, improvising traps, and guiding the queen's forces with careful strategy. In one crucial moment, a group of armed rebels cornered them in a wide hall. Seraphine's blade was ready, but Ethan stepped forward. "Trust me," he said, and with a series of quick movements he diverted their attention, allowing the queen and her loyalists to flank the attackers. The rebels were defeated and the hall fell silent once more. After the chaos subsided, the queen turned to him, her breathing heavy, her armor scratched, her hair disheveled. "You have risked your life for me," she said quietly. "Why?" Ethan wiped sweat and blood from his brow. "Because someone believed I was worth saving first," he replied simply. Her eyes widened. For centuries, no one had spoken to her this way. She had been revered, feared, and obeyed, but never understood in this manner. She realized then that Ethan's courage was not just in battle. It was in his willingness to stand by principles, to face danger, and to protect others without seeking glory or reward. In the days that followed, the Queen took bold steps. She announced a new alliance with Earth, formalizing peace and opening channels for diplomacy. This was unprecedented. An alien empire had never extended such trust to humanity before. Ethan's influence had changed the course of history on Varela, simply through his presence, his courage, and his unyielding spirit. The palace itself began to change as well. Guards who had once been suspicious or hostile now watched Ethan with quiet respect. The people whispered of the human who had faced an empire and lived, whose bravery had inspired even the queen. He had become a symbol, not of conquest, but of resilience, of hope, of the human spirit. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the city, Ethan stood on a balcony with the queen. They looked out over Varela together, the storm long gone, the air calm and clear. For the first time, the queen felt a sense of calm herself, a rare moment of peace amid centuries of power struggles and war. "You have changed my empire," she said softly, "and you have changed me." Ethan smiled faintly, though he was still weary from the events of the past weeks. "I did not intend to change anything," he said. "I just did what I had to do to survive and to help those who needed it." Seraphine looked at him, studying his scars, his posture, and the quiet strength in his eyes. She realized that she had seen countless warriors, countless leaders, countless heroes, yet none had stood as he did. Not because of strength or weaponry, but because of heart. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them grew, not romantic, but forged in the heat of survival and mutual respect. Ethan continued to teach the queen about humanity, and she, in turn, shared insights about leadership, strategy, and the burdens of ruling an empire. Together they envisioned a future where humans and Varelans could coexist, not as conquerors and conquered, but as allies. Then, one day, the queen presented Ethan with his armor, repaired and polished. "You may wear it again," she said. Ethan shook his head. "I don't need it anymore," he replied. He had learned that true strength was not in metal or shields, but in the courage to face the world unprotected, to stand for what you believe and to never surrender. Seraphine smiled, the first genuine smile in centuries. She understood now that humans were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of inspiring greatness even in those who had ruled for lifetimes. Ethan Cole, unarmored and fully human, had done what no alien warrior had ever done. He had taught a queen the true meaning of strength. As the sun rose over the crystal towers of Varela, it reflected off Ethan's skin, scarred but proud, standing tall beside the queen. The empire had changed, the queen had changed, and the human had shown the universe that courage, heart, and willpower could surpass any armor, any weapon, and any expectation. For the first time in her life, Seraphine looked at a human not as fragile, not as weak, but as equal, and perhaps, just perhaps, even greater than many who had called themselves rulers before. And Ethan, unarmored, unbroken, and fully human, stood ready for whatever challenge would come next. The storm had ended, but a new era had begun. And in that era, the human spirit shone brighter than any crystal palace, stronger than any alien blade, and unyielding in the face of the